Hi, I'm Jen Pollock, and I coordinate school mental health services at ESU number 3, and I'm here today to talk about positive behavior interventions and supports. In this section, you will learn about P.B.I.S, positive behavior interventions and supports, and 3 strategies you can immediately implement to better support students in the learning environment. Specifically, we will explore 3 key strategies: how to modify the learning environment, how to enhance relationships, and the importance of building positive behaviors and skills in all students. So what is P.B.I.S, or positive behavioral interventions and supports? P.B.I.S is a framework for preventing problem behavior and supporting a person's social, emotional, and behavioral well-being. This framework complements the MTSS multi-tiered system of support by addressing the heart side of the pyramid. It also addresses all areas of the school where a student may spend time with common expectations and common language. These common expectations that are explicitly taught and reinforced provide safe, predictable environments through common language and understanding across all adults. For example, your school and classroom may have common expectations like be safe, be responsible, and be respectful. What be safe looks like in science may be very different from ELA or a learner's time in physical education. These create firm expectations and flexible means through common language of safety, but there is still variability in how that looks across environments.
If I'm a part of the rules, I'm 100% more likely to want to meet those expectations, because when there's someone pushing you and letting you know that there are certain goals that you have to meet, not only for the student, but for the teacher, I feel like it helps them both.
To fully grasp this framework, it is important to understand some key concepts in behavioral theory, which is the research in which the P.B.I.S framework is grounded. When we understand why a behavior occurs as educators, we can more effectively support what the student needs in order to be successful. Let's dig into this a little bit deeper. When we talk about the whys of behavior, we talk about those in terms of functions. These functions, or whys of behavior, are built on the foundational understanding that all behavior is communication. The 4 commonly understood functions of behavior are to get something or gain access to something, to escape or avoid something, to communicate an unmet emotional need, or to meet a sensory need. When we think about gaining access or getting something, this can be tangible things, food, technology, or non-tangible things like attention from adult or peers. Similarly, when we think about the function of escaping or avoiding, this can be seeking to stop something we can't or don't want to do. And maybe you've engaged in this behavior yourself by changing the subject to avoid a difficult or non-preferred conversation, skipping plans, or deciding to call in sick at a time when you felt anxious or nervous about an event. So in addition to the functions of behavior, seeking to gain something or escape something, the next 2 functions look to meet a sensory or emotional need. One example of a sensory need might be for the individual to leave a room that's loud or overstimulating for a quieter environment. Alternatively, complaining about a project so others recognize or praise your contributions would be an example of a behavior serving an emotional need. As educators, we can most effectively implement positive behavioral interventions and supports when we think functionally and systematically about behavior. It takes the guesswork out of our response and frees us up to become more proactive with support versus responsive to the behaviors. While the functions of behavior like escaping, avoidance, or getting needs met stem from learned patterns, they can also be rooted in more primal, biological fight, flight, or freeze responses. Such behaviors are hardwired survival mechanisms in the face of perceived threats or stressors. And let's face it, if we're being chased by a bear, we want our primal responses to take over and conserve energy so we can protect ourselves. Here are some nervous system responses you may see in the classroom when a student is in fight, flight, or freeze mode. Take a moment to look at some of these responses and what feelings or actions may be underneath this primal response. Notice that when we observe behaviors that we might see when a student is in their flight response, there are quite a few potential feelings or actions, such as feeling stuck, worried, pressured, or anxious. When we understand our primal responses such as fight, flight, and freeze, as well as the functions of behaviors, as educators, we can use our energies to prevent problem behaviors from occurring and create safe, secure, and predictable learning environments where our primal responses are less likely to drive our actions. Let's take a moment to reflect on our learning so far. Pick one of the questions here and jot down your thoughts. Now that you have a foundational understanding of what P.B.I.S is and a foundational understanding of the common functions of behavior, let's dig into strategies that you can try tomorrow in your classroom or learning environment to better support the social, emotional, behavioral, and mental well-being of students. We will consider strategies in 3 key areas: environmental strategies that specifically focus on the learning environment, relational strategies and how to improve or build upon authentic and positive relationships with students, and skill-building strategies. Let's focus first on modifying the learning environment. Let's face it, there is a lot outside of an educator's control. After all, we're supporting a whole child. They're more than just the future mathematician or scientist seated at a desk. They arrive at school each day with their own invisible, emotional backpacks filled to the brim, and while some bring resiliency or optimism, others bring burdens. We can't control everything that a child carries, but we can control the learning environment in which they engage. When we think about designing a positive learning environment, there are several factors or lenses to consider. They include the social environment, emotional environment, instructional practices, behavioral expectations, the physical environment, and sensory factors in the environment.
A classroom that makes me comfortable, like it's kind of like with books and stuff in it.
Not like a crowded area, like a comfortable environment.
The thing that makes students more included in the classroom that teachers can do is they can put posters around the room that makes things more interactive and more relatable to the students. They make it sure everyone can participate, and they just make it all very inclusive and interactive.
If everyone's like nice and respectful, including the teacher and the students around you, it always just makes the classroom feel a lot more comfortable. And then also just like an organized, like safe, clean space is always great so you don't get distracted.
Foundational to this design is ensuring every student has the opportunity to learn and understand what is expected of them within their environment. We design a positive learning environment through a social and emotional lens with our implementation of positive behavioral interventions and supports. It's the communities we create that are inclusive, safe, and supportive. As we've talked about today, using a P.B.I.S framework for common language and expectations that are taught, reinforced, and limited to 3 to 5 positively stated expectations sets everyone up for success. In our design, we want to leverage instructional practices to meet the needs of every learner. We want strong, rigorous core instruction that is accessible and holds high expectations of every learner. Furthermore, in our design, we want a physical environment that's conducive to learning, is safe and welcoming. We want to ensure that our environments are psychologically safe and built on trusted relationships between adults and students. Finally, we want to ensure that sensory factors in the space are supportive of each learner, the physical environment, and the instructional practices occurring. Strategy 2 is enhancing relationships. We know that when students feel welcome, safe, and connected, they are better regulated emotionally and socially. They are more engaged in their learning, and they are set up to be successful to meet those high expectations we hold. We also know that we need to teach learners the skills necessary for success. The culture, climate, and psychological safety that we establish in the school setting is an important building block towards positive relationships with students. Building a positive relationship can come more quickly with some students, but committing to supporting all learners is one of the most effective interventions we can implement to turn a behavior around. Simply taking a minute or 2 a day to connect with a student about something they enjoy or are passionate about is about all it can take. One easy to implement strategy to build a relationship with a student is called a 2x10 strategy. All you need to do is take 2 minutes a day to have a conversation with a student about non-academic things. things like sports or music or just something they enjoy. This strategy helps foster an authentic relationship with the student and can be all it takes to get back to sure footing with the student. A third strategy is building positive behaviors and skills in students. We can build these skills in students by teaching them to understand how their brain and nervous system are connected to their thoughts, feelings, and behaviors. By empowering learners to grow their learning and emotional regulation capacities, we build on the foundations of the positive behavior intervention framework and put students in the driver's seat of their success by giving them the knowledge and skills they need to be successful. Incorporating educational neuroscience into our classrooms by teaching students about their brains and nervous systems is one way we can build student skills. So how can we do this in the classroom? One way is to leverage metacognition strategies to model thinking about thinking. In early grades, this might just be labeling our emotions. Teaching students to identify and name their emotions is a critical step in managing their feelings and reactions effectively. For example, during instruction, you might say, "Class, I can see some of you might be feeling a bit frustrated after that assignment, and that's completely normal. When I encounter a tough reading assignment, I often feel a bit overwhelmed too." One coping strategy I use is to take a deep breath and remind myself that it's okay to find things difficult sometimes. I also like to break the task into smaller parts to make it more manageable. Other examples in using educational neuroscience to build student skills is to incorporate movement and physical activity within the daily routine. Have you ever had a time when experiencing a stressful event where getting up and taking a quick walk helped refocus you and better manage that stressful moment? Just as this is effective for us as adults, it's effective for students too. Another way to incorporate educational neuroscience into the classroom is to teach body sensation for younger students. This helps them connect the internal sensations to the emotions they are feeling. For example, when they felt angry, scared, or sad. You might ask students to identify internal sensations when they identify their emotions. You might say, "What did you notice in your tummy? How did your skin feel? Was your brain racing? Did you notice your heart rate increase?" Helping connect the internal feelings to the external displays of emotion are important in helping students understand the connection of their emotional and physical states. Another strategy you can implement in your classroom is leveraging sensory practices to calm. Again, using a metacognition approach, we can talk about strategies that we use as adults to calm ourselves. This could look like saying out loud to your classroom, "I'm feeling nervous about this unit assessment coming up today. I'm going to practice taking some calming breaths before we start this assessment." Another way we can support our students is to understand the educational neuroscience is giving them opportunities to reframe their thoughts. How many times have you heard all or nothing thinking in your classroom? "I never get called on. I never get any of the answers right. I always make stupid mistakes on tests." You get the idea, and I imagine you've heard one, two, or all three of these in your classroom. Helping students restate and recognize these negative thought patterns is important. Leveraging a growth mindset is so important. It helps students build grit and resilience. One final strategy to build student skills is to give them opportunities for focused attention. These are practices that can calm or energize the nervous system based on their need. Modeling when you are feeling over or under energized in a situation and strategies to bring yourself up or down is important. For example, if a student has low energy and is lethargic, helping them find energizing strategies such as taking a walk may be helpful. Conversely, when a student has a lot of energy and needs to come back down, giving them opportunities to calm themselves through deep breaths, for example, could be helpful. As we think about leveraging positive behavioral interventions and supports in our classroom, we recognize that these high-leverage, low-cost, no-cost strategies put us back in the driver's seat in our classroom and set every child up for success. Sure, some students may need a little bit more, but with a solid foundation, they are more likely to find success in your classroom. We have covered a lot today with this topic. We talked about what P.B.I.S is, learned 3 key strategies to supporting students within a P.B.I.S framework. As we wrap up our time together today, let's reflect on some key takeaways. P.B.I.S is a framework that prevents problem behavior and supports a child's overall social, emotional, and behavioral well-being. As educators, understanding the why of a behavior helps us get to what to do quicker and more efficiently. Lastly, there are several strategies within our wheelhouse as educators that we can do to prevent problem behaviors and support students, including modifying the learning environment, enhancing our relationships, and building positive behaviors and skills through teaching and expectations. One caring adult is all it takes to positively impact a child's life. Thank you for taking on this profound responsibility and for the great work you do for all Nebraska children and youth. Before I kick it over to Jackie to talk about verbal intervention and de-escalation strategies, why don't you take a moment to jot down one strategy you hope to implement this year?